Admiral Dexerin stood on the command deck of his flagship and watched the blue planet spin slowly in the darkness of space. His four eyes blinked one after another as he studied the world. Below, Earth. That was what the creatures living there called it. Such a simple name for such a simple world. Behind him, his officers moved quietly at their stations. They had done this many times before. The Velkreth Dominion had conquered 347 species across the galaxy. They had burned worlds and crushed civilizations that were far more advanced than this one. This little blue planet would be nothing more than another easy victory. "Admiral," said his communications officer, a younger Velkroth named Kethvel, "we have finished studying their transmissions. These humans are ... primitive. They still fight among themselves. They have barely touched their own moon." Dexorin made a sound that passed for laughter among his kind. "They fight each other. How delightful! They will make excellent slaves once we break their spirit." He turned to look at the massive holographic display that showed Earth in perfect detail. The planet was covered in blue oceans and green lands. Tiny lights dotted the dark side where the humans had built their cities. Millions of them lived in those cities. Billions across the whole world. They had no idea what was coming for them. "Sir," said another officer, this one older and more careful with his words, "the Galactic Council sent another warning about this species. The ancient texts speak of them with ... concern." Soren waved one of his long arms dismissively. "The Council is full of cowards who fear their own shadows. What do these ancient texts say? That humans are dangerous? That we should avoid their little world?" He laughed again, louder this time. "Look at them. They cannot even stop fighting each other. They are nothing." The older officer lowered his head, but did not speak again. He had served the Admiral for many years and knew when to stay silent. But something about this mission felt wrong to him. He had read those ancient texts himself. The warnings were not written by cowards. They were written by survivors. Vexeron did not care about warnings or ancient texts. He cared about conquest and glory. The Velkroth had never lost a war. They had weapons that could crack planets open like eggs. They had ships that could cross the galaxy in days. What could these primitive humans possibly do against such power? "Begin the bombardment," he ordered. "Destroy their major cities. Show them what happens to species that dare to exist without our permission." The weapons officer nodded and pressed a series of buttons on his console. Across the Velkroth fleet, thousands of plasma cannons began to charge. The ships moved into formation, forming a ring around the helpless planet below. On Earth, people went about their normal lives. They worked in their offices and walked their dogs and kissed their children goodnight. They had no idea that death was coming from the sky. Some of them looked up at the stars that night and wondered if they were alone in the universe. They were about to get their answer. The first plasma charge hit New York City at exactly midnight local time. A ball of burning light fell from the sky and turned everything it touched into ash. Buildings that had stood for centuries vanished in seconds. Millions of people died before they even knew what was happening. More charges followed. London, Tokyo, Beijing, Moscow, Paris, Sydney, one by one. The great cities of Earth burned. The sky turned red with fire and black with smoke. The screams of the dying mixed with the roar of destruction. Dexorin watched it all with satisfaction. This was his favorite part of any conquest. The moment when a species realized how small and weak they truly were. He imagined the humans running through their burning streets, crying out to whatever gods they believed in, begging for mercy that would never come. "Beautiful," he said softly. "Simply beautiful." The bombardment lasted for 6 hours. 12,000 plasma charges fell upon Earth during that time. When it was finally over, the planet looked very different from space. The bright lights of the cities were gone. In their place were dark scars of destruction that covered entire continents. Dexorin waited for the surrender transmission. It always came at this point. Every species they had ever conquered had sent one. Sometimes they begged. Sometimes they offered tribute. Sometimes they simply asked for mercy. But they always surrendered. He waited and waited. Nothing came. Kethvel, he said, his voice no longer so confident. Why have they not surrendered? Open a channel. Demand their submission. The communications officer worked at his console for several long moments. His movements became faster and more nervous as time passed. Finally, he looked up at the Admiral with something like fear in his eyes. Sir, there are no transmissions from the surface. No communications at all. The planet is... silent. Dexeron felt something cold move through his body. It was not fear. The Velkrath did not feel fear. But it was something close to it. Something he had never felt before. That is impossible, he said. We did not destroy everyone. Our sensors show billions of life signs still remaining. They must be communicating somehow. The older officer stepped forward, his face pale. Admiral, I am detecting something strange. The life signs are... moving. All of them. They are moving underground. Ixorin turned to look at the sensor display. The officer was right. Across the entire planet, the human life signs were descending into the Earth. Millions of them. Billions of them. They were going down into tunnels and caves and underground shelters. They were disappearing beneath the surface, like water draining from a basin. Exploring these tunnels, the Ixorin demanded. The display changed to show a cross-section of the planet. What he saw made his blood run cold. The tunnels were everywhere. They stretched across continents and under oceans. They connected every major population center. And according to the sensors, they were old. Very old. Some of them had been built centuries ago. They knew, whispered Kethval. They knew someone would come. Dexerin stared at the display in silence. The humans had not been caught by surprise. They had not panicked. They had not run around screaming like the other species always did. Instead, they had calmly and quietly retreated into shelters they had built. Generations ago, they had been preparing for this moment their entire existence. The older officer spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. Sir, I am detecting weapon signatures from the planet's surface. Very faint, hidden, but they are there. Thousands of them. Weapons we did not see before the bombardment.
What kind of weapons?
Dexerin asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. Unknown, sir, but they are large. Very large. Silence fell over the command deck. Every officer had stopped working. Every eye was fixed on the Admiral. The easy victory they had expected was suddenly feeling less certain. Dexerin straightened his spine and forced confidence into his voice. It does not matter. They are still primitive. Whatever weapons they have cannot match our technology. We will send ground forces to flush them out of their holes like the vermin they are. But even as he spoke those words, he could not shake the feeling that he had made a terrible mistake. The Galactic Council had warned them. The ancient texts had warned them. And now, looking at the silent planet below, he was beginning to understand why. The humans had not surrendered because they had no intention of. Surrendering, they had not screamed, because they had been waiting for this, and they had not died, because dying was not part of their plan. Nexerin looked at Earth and saw what he had failed to see before. This was not a planet of primitive creatures waiting to be conquered. This was a trap, and he had walked right into it. Far below, in the darkness beneath the mountains, humanity waited in silence. They had prepared for this day for 200 years. Now it was time to show the universe why the ancient texts spoke of them with fear. The war had not ended with the bombardment. It had only just begun. 3 weeks passed after the bombardment. The Velkrath declared victory to the Galactic Council and began landing their occupation forces on Earth's scorched surface. Admiral Vexeron sent thousands of soldiers to secure the ruined cities and hunt for survivors. He told himself that everything was going according to plan. He almost believed it, but something was wrong. He could feel it in his bones. The first reports came from a patrol unit in what remained of London. 20 soldiers had entered the ruins to search for human survivors. They had reported finding strange markings on the walls, symbols painted in ash and blood. Then their communications had gone silent. When a rescue team arrived to find them, there was nothing left but empty armor and weapons scattered on the ground. No bodies, no blood. No sign of what had happened? Dexerin told himself it was an accident. Perhaps the humans had set traps before retreating underground. It was nothing to worry about. Then it happened again, and again, and again. In Berlin, an entire company of 50 soldiers vanished overnight. Their camp was found empty in the morning. The food was still warm on their plates. Their weapons were still in their hands. But the soldiers themselves were gone. The only thing left behind was a single word carved into the ground in the Velcroth language. Soon, in Tokyo, a supply depot exploded without warning. The Velcroth engineers examined the wreckage and found no evidence of human weapons. The explosion had come from inside the depot itself. Someone had walked in, planted a bomb, and walked out. Dexerin leaned forward, his 4 eyes fixed on the screen. This was the first time any human had communicated with them since the bombardment. He expected begging. He expected surrender. He expected fear. He saw none of those things. "You killed 3 billion of us," Admiral Vance continued. "You burned our cities. You murdered our children. You thought we would break?" She paused, and something like a smile crossed her face. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator. "You were wrong." The screen split to show images from around Earth. In every occupied city, Velcroth soldiers were dying. Human resistance fighters emerged from tunnels and ruins, striking with perfect coordination. Explosions lit up the night. Enemy vehicles burned. Alien screams filled the air. "See," Admiral Vance said, "humans have a special talent. We fight each other constantly. We always have. We probably always will. But that fighting taught us something valuable. It taught us how to wage war better than any species in the galaxy." Dexerin opened his mouth to give an order, but no words came out. He watched his ground forces being slaughtered on 100 different screens. The humans were everywhere and nowhere. They struck from shadows and vanished like ghosts. His soldiers did not even know who was killing them. "Here is something else your Galactic Council should have warned you about," Admiral Vance continued. "When humans fight each other, we are divided. We are weak. We are easy to defeat." Her eyes seemed to stare directly into Dexerin's soul. "But when something threatens our home, when something hurts our families, we become one people, one purpose, one fury." She leaned closer to the camera. "You did not conquer Earth, Admiral Dexerin. You united it. For the first time in our entire history, every human being on this planet agrees on one thing." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You must pay for what you did." The transmission ended. The screens returned to normal. And that was when Dexerin noticed something that made his blood freeze. The debris field around Earth was moving for weeks. Sensors had shown thousands of pieces of space junk floating in orbit. Old satellites. Broken ships. Worthless garbage left over from humanity's primitive space program. His officers had ignored it completely. Why would they pay attention to trash? But the trash was not trash. The broken satellites were not broken. The dead ships were not dead. They were weapons platforms, hidden in plain sight, waiting for this exact moment. "All ships, raise shields," Dexerin screamed. Evasive maneuvers. Now. He was too late. The hidden platforms activated simultaneously. Thousands of them. They turned toward the Velcroth fleet and opened fire with weapons that should not have existed. Plasma cannons. Missile batteries. Energy beams that cut through ship armor like paper. The humans had been building these weapons for 200 years, and they had built them well. The first wave of fire destroyed 60 ships in 3 seconds. The second wave destroyed 40 more. The Velcroth fleet scattered in panic, trying to escape the killing field. But the weapons platforms were everywhere. There was nowhere to run. There was nowhere to hide. Dexerin watched half his fleet die in less than 5 minutes. Ships that had conquered entire star systems exploded like toys. Thousands of his soldiers burned in the cold darkness of space. The pride of the Velcroth Dominion was reduced to scattered debris floating around the planet they had thought to conquer. Sir," Kethful shouted over the chaos. "Something is rising from the planet's surface. Something big." Thexoran looked at his sensors and felt his heart stop. From beneath the Pacific Ocean, something enormous was climbing toward space. It was a ship. A human ship. But it was like no ship he had ever seen. It was 5 kilometers long. Its hull was covered with weapons. Its engines burned with power that rivaled a small star. The Nemesis had awakened. On the bridge of the massive warship, Admiral Vance stood with her hands clasped behind her back. Around her, 3,000 crew members worked at their stations with perfect efficiency. These were the best soldiers humanity had ever produced. They had trained for this moment their entire lives. "All weapons online," reported her tactical officer. "Enemy fleet is in disarray. They have lost 53% of their ships. The sleepers?" Admiral Vance asked, fully awakened. 3 million soldiers ready for deployment. Dropships are standing by." Admiral Vance nodded slowly. Outside the windows of the Nemesis, she could see the burning remains of Velcroth ships. She could see Earth below, scarred but not defeated. She thought of her daughter, her son, her husband, all the people she had lost in the bombardment. "Launch the dropships," she ordered. "Take back our cities. Show no mercy to armed combatants." She paused. "But remember who we are. We do not kill those who surrender. We do not harm civilians. We are humans, not monsters." Yes. "Admiral." Thousands of dropships poured from the Nemesis and the hidden bases across Earth. Each one carried 100 soldiers who had slept for decades, waiting for this day. They fell toward the planet like rain, heading for every occupied city. On the ground, the Velcroth soldiers saw the sky fill with human ships. They saw their fleet burning in orbit. They heard the screams of their comrades dying all around them. And for the first time in the history of their species, the Velcroth knew what it felt like to be the prey instead of the predator. Admiral Dexeron gave the only order he could give. "All ships, retreat. Fall back to Velcroth space. Now." The surviving ships turned and ran. They activated their faster-than-light drives and fled into the darkness between stars. They left their ground forces behind. They left their dead behind. They left their pride behind. Admiral Vance watched them go. She did not smile. There was no joy in this victory. Only grim satisfaction. "Should we pursue, Admiral?" her tactical officer asked. "Not yet," she replied. "Let them run. Let them tell their masters what happened here. Let them spread fear through the entire Dominion." She turned to face her crew. "We have won the battle for Earth, but the war is just beginning." She looked out at the stars that had once seemed so far away. Somewhere out there, the Velcroth were running home to warn their leaders. Somewhere out there, humanity's allies were preparing their fleets. Somewhere out there, a reckoning was coming for every species that had ever thought humans were weak. "Set a course for Velcroth space," Admiral Vance ordered. "It is time to bring the war to them." The Nemesis turned toward the stars and began to move. Behind it, Earth was already beginning to heal. Fires were being put out. Survivors were emerging from the underground shelters. Children were looking up at the sky with hope instead of fear. Humanity had survived the worst attack in its history. Now it was time to make sure it never happened again. The hunters had become the hunted. And the hunted were very, very angry. Admiral Vexeron stood before the Supreme Council of the Velcroth Dominion and told them what had happened at Earth. He told them about the hidden weapons. He told them about the massive warship that rose from the ocean. He told them about the 3 million soldiers who had been sleeping underground for decades. He told them everything. The council did not believe him. "You lost half your fleet to primitives," said the Supreme Commander, an ancient Velcroth named Verthax. His voice dripped with contempt. "You expect us to believe that creatures who cannot even stop fighting each other somehow defeated our greatest warriors?" "I am telling you the truth," Dexorn insisted. "The humans are not what we thought. They are dangerous. More dangerous than anything we have ever faced. We must prepare our defenses. We must enough." Verthax slammed his fist on the table. "You have brought shame upon the Dominion. You will return to Earth with a new fleet. A larger fleet. You will crush these humans and prove that the Velcroth bow to no one. Exorin wanted to argue. He wanted to tell them that they were making a terrible mistake. But he knew it would do no good. The council had ruled for 10,000 years. They had never lost a war. They could not imagine that this time might be different. So he bowed his head and accepted his orders. He gathered a new fleet of 500 ships and set course for Earth. This time, he told himself, things would be different. This time, he would be ready for whatever the humans threw at him. He was wrong. The human fleet met him halfway. They did not wait for him to reach Earth. They came to him, appearing out of nowhere in the darkness between stars. And they were not alone. Exorin stared at his sensors in disbelief. The human ships were there. Yes. The Nemesis led them, its massive hull bristling with weapons. But there were other ships too. Ships that did not belong to humanity. The Corvani had come. Their fleet of 300 vessels flew beside the human ships like old friends. The Corvani were a species the Velcroth had tried to conquer 2 centuries ago. They had escaped and hidden in the outer reaches of the galaxy. Now they had returned, and they wanted revenge. The Mithra had come. Their elegant silver ships glided through space with deadly grace. The Mithra were scientists and healers, not warriors. But they had spent the last 50 years building weapons based on Valkrith technology they had stolen. Weapons that could match anything the Dominion had. The Broken Chain Alliance had come. They were a collection of 12 species that had escaped Velkrith slavery over the centuries. Their ships were old and patched together from stolen parts. But there were thousands of them, and every single crew member burned with hatred for their former masters. How? Exorin whispered. How do the humans have so many allies? Kethvel checked his records and found the answer. 300 years ago, human explorers had saved the Corvani from extinction. 200 years ago, human doctors had cured the Mithra plague. 100 years ago, human smugglers had helped the Broken Chain Alliance escape from Velkrith. The humans had been making friends across the galaxy for centuries as an Ashries. They had helped species in need without asking for anything in return. They had shown kindness to strangers simply because it was the right thing to do, and now those strangers had come to repay that kindness. All ships, battle formation. Exorin commanded. We will crush them all. The battle lasted for 3 days. It raged across an entire star system, leaving burning wreckage scattered among the planets. The Velcroth fought with everything they had. They were the greatest warriors in the galaxy. They had never been defeated, but they had never faced an enemy like this. The humans did not fight like other species. They did not form neat lines and exchange fire until one side broke. Instead, they attacked in small groups that struck without warning and vanished before the Velcroth could respond. They used asteroids as cover. They hid behind moons. They appeared from blind spots that should not have existed. Admiral Vance commanded the battle from the bridge of the Nemesis. She did not shout orders or panic when things went wrong. She simply watched the battle unfold and made small adjustments that somehow changed everything. A ship moved here. A squadron attacked there. Slowly, steadily, the Velcroth fleet was being taken apart. They are too good, Kethvel said on the 3rd day. It is like they know what we are going to do before we do it. He was right. Humanity had spent its entire history fighting wars. They had developed strategies and tactics that no other species had ever imagined. They knew how to win battles that seemed impossible. They knew how to turn weakness into strength. They knew how to make their enemies defeat themselves. By the end of the 3rd day, the Velcroth fleet was broken. 300 ships had been destroyed. 100 more had surrendered. The rest were scattered and running for home. Exorin sat alone on his flagship, watching the destruction on his screens. His crew was dead or captured. His weapons were offline. His engines were failing. He had nothing left. A message appeared on his screen. It was from Admiral Vance. Admiral Exorin, she said, your fleet is destroyed. Your crew is gone. You have 2 choices. Surrender and face justice for what you did to Earth, or die alone in the darkness. Exorin considered his options. Death would be honorable. The Velcroth did not surrender. They had never surrendered in 10,000 years of conquest. But as he sat in the darkness of his ruined ship, he realized something. He did not want to die. He wanted to live. He wanted to see what would happen next. He wanted to understand how everything had gone so wrong. "I surrender," he said quietly. Human soldiers boarded his ship an hour later. They moved through the corridors in perfect silence, their weapons ready for any threat. But there was no threat. Vixorin waited for them on the bridge, his hands raised above his head. The soldiers did not hurt him. They did not mock him or beat him or treat him with cruelty. They simply took his weapons and led him to a shuttle that carried him to the Nemesis. Admiral Vance was waiting for him in a small room. She sat at a table with 2 cups of something hot and steaming. She gestured for him to sit across from her. "You know what this is?" she asked, pushing one of the cups toward him. Vixorin looked at the dark liquid. "No, it is called coffee. Humans drink it when they need to stay awake. When they need to think clearly." She took a sip from her own cup. "I've been drinking a lot of it lately." Vixorin did not touch the cup. "Why am I here? Why did you not kill me?" "Because killing you would not bring back the 3 billion people you murdered," Admiral Vance replied. "Because revenge is not justice. Because humans are better than that." She paused. Most of the time, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper. She placed it on the table in front of him. On it was written a single sentence in the Velkrath language. "God, you should have read the warning labels." Vixorin stared at the note. It was the same message that had been left on the command chairs of captured officers. The same message that had appeared throughout the war. He finally understood what it meant. The Galactic Council had warned the Velkrath about humans. The ancient texts had warned them. Everyone had warned them. But they had not listened. They had been too arrogant, too proud, too certain of their own superiority. "What happens now?" he asked. Admiral Vance leaned back in her chair. "Now you go before the Galactic Council. You tell them what happened here. You tell them that humanity is no longer hiding on its little blue planet. You tell them that we are coming out into the galaxy, and we will not be conquered. We will not be enslaved. We will not be burned." She stood up and walked to the door. Before she left, she turned back to look at him one more time. "And you tell them one more thing, Admiral? You tell them that humanity does not start wars, but we finish them. Every single time." She left him alone with his cold coffee and his broken pride. Outside the window, the stars stretched on forever. Somewhere out there, the Velkrath Dominion was waiting. They thought they were safe in their fortress worlds. They thought the humans would never reach them. They were wrong. The hunt was not over. It had only just begun. The Galactic Council Chamber was the largest room ever built by any species in the known universe. It floated in space at the center of the galaxy. A massive station where representatives from 400 civilizations gathered to discuss the fate of worlds. For 10,000 years, the great powers had met here to make laws and settle disputes. For 10,000 years, the Velkrath had held the most powerful seat at the table. Today, everything changed. Admiral Helena Vance walked into the chamber with 12 human soldiers at her back. She wore a simple black uniform with no medals or decorations. She did not need symbols to show her power. The entire galaxy already knew what she had done. 400 alien species watched her enter. Some of them were tall and thin. Some were short and round. Some had fur. Some had scales. Some had no bodies at all, existing only as clouds of light. They were different in every possible way. But they all shared one thing in common. They were afraid. News of the war had spread across the galaxy like fire. Everyone knew what had happened at Earth. Everyone knew about the bombardment. Everyone knew about the hidden weapons and the sleeping soldiers and the massive warship that rose from the ocean. Everyone knew that humanity had crushed the greatest military power in the galaxy in less than 6 months, and everyone knew that. The humans were not finished. Admiral Vance walked to the center of the chamber and stood. On the speaking platform, above her, holographic screens showed her face to every corner of the massive room. Behind her, the human soldiers stood at attention, their eyes scanning the crowd for any threat. The supreme commander of the Velkrith, Verthax, rose from his seat. His face was twisted with anger and shame. His species had ruled this council for millennia. Now, they sat in disgrace, their fleet destroyed, their empire crumbling. "This is an outrage," he shouted. "These primitives have no right to stand before this council. They are murderers. Sit down." Admiral Vance spoke quietly, but her voice carried through the entire chamber. Something in her tone made Verthax stop mid-sentence. He looked at her with hatred in his eyes, but he sat down.
"Yeah,"
Admiral Vance said. She looked around the chamber at the hundreds of species watching her. Some looked curious. Some looked frightened. Some looked hopeful. She took a deep breath and began to speak. "6 months ago, the Velkrath Dominion attacked my planet without warning. They dropped 12,000 plasma charges on our cities. They killed 3 billion of my people. Men, women, children, families burned alive in their homes. Lovers turned to ash in each other's arms. Babies who never got to speak their first words." She paused to let her words sink in. "Svelkroth thought we would surrender. They thought we would break. They thought we were weak because we fought among ourselves. They were wrong." The holographic screens behind her changed to show images of the war, the hidden weapons activating, the nemesis rising from the sea, the allied fleets joining together, the Velkrath ships burning in the darkness of space. Humanity did not break. We bent. And then we snapped back harder than anyone imagined possible. She looked directly at Verthax. "Your fleet is destroyed. Your occupied worlds have been liberated. Your empire is falling apart as we speak. Species you enslaved for centuries are rising up against you. The Velkrath Dominion is finished." Verthax said nothing. What could he say? Everything she spoke was true. Admiral Vance turned back to the full council. "But I did not come here to gloat about our victory. I came here to talk about the future," she gestured, and the screens changed again. This time, they showed Earth. Not the burned and scarred Earth from after the bombardment. They showed Earth as it looked now. Cities being rebuilt, forests growing back, children playing in parks under clear blue skies. "Humans have a choice to make," Admiral Vance continued. "We could use our power to conquer. We could build an empire of our own. We have the weapons. We have the soldiers. We have the allies. No one in this galaxy could stop us." The chamber was completely silent. Every species held their breath, waiting to hear what humanity would do. But that is not who we are. Admiral Vance's voice softened slightly. "Humans are not perfect. We have done terrible things to each other throughout our history. We have waged wars. We have committed atrocities. We have nearly destroyed ourselves more times than I can count. But we have also done something else. We have learned. We have grown. We have become better." She looked around the chamber with something like hope in her eyes. "We did not want this war. We spent 2 centuries preparing for it, hoping it would never come. We looked up at the stars and dreamed of meeting other species. We dreamed of friendship, of cooperation, of building something greater than any one world could build alone." She straightened her spine and lifted her chin. "That is still our dream. Humanity does not want to rule the galaxy. We want to be part of it. We want to share our knowledge and learn from yours. We want to trade and explore and discover. We want to be your partners, not your masters." A murmur ran through the chamber. This was not what the council had expected. They had expected threats. They had expected demands. They had expected humans to act like every other powerful species and try to dominate everyone else. Instead, they got something far more dangerous. They got hope. Admiral Vance raised her hand to quiet the murmurs. "But let me be very clear about one thing. Humanity offers friendship to those who want it. We offer peace to those who seek it. We offer help to those who need it." Her eyes grew hard. "But if anyone ever threatens our home again, if anyone ever tries to burn our cities or kill our children, they will learn the same lesson the Velkrath learned." She took one step forward, and her voice rang out across the chamber like a bell. Humans do not start wars, but we finish them. Every single time. We fight with everything we have and everything we are. We do not stop until the threat is gone. We do not surrender. We do not give up. We do not break. She let the silence stretch for a long moment. The ancient texts warned you about us. The Galactic Council told the Velkrath to leave us alone. They did not listen. They paid the price. She looked around at the hundreds of species watching her. I hope the rest of you are wiser. I hope we never have to prove how dangerous we can be. But if you force our hand, know this. 3 billion humans died in the bombardment. And look what the survivors did in response. She smiled, and it was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a species that had stared into the darkness and refused to blink. Imagine what we would do if you made us truly angry. The council voted unanimously to grant humanity a permanent seat. They did not do this out of gratitude or friendship. They did it out of fear. They looked at the small, fragile creatures from the little blue planet and saw something terrifying. They saw a species that had evolved on a death world, surrounded by predators and disasters and disease. They saw a species that had spent its entire existence learning how to survive against impossible odds. They saw a species that treated war as an art form and peace as a precious gift. They saw humanity, and they understood, finally, why the ancient texts had told them to be afraid. 1 year later, the first human embassy opened on the Galactic Council station. Diplomats and scientists and artists from Earth walked among the stars for the first time, meeting species they had only dreamed about. They made friends. They made allies. They made the galaxy a little brighter with their presence, and back on Earth. In the rebuilt streets of cities that had once been ash, children played without fear. They looked up at the night sky and saw stars that no longer seemed so far away. They knew that somewhere out there, their species had made its mark. They knew that humanity had earned its place among the stars, not through conquest, not through cruelty, but through courage, determination, and the simple refusal to ever give up. Admiral Helena Vance retired from the military 2 years after the war. She bought a small house in the mountains and spent her days watching the sunrise. Sometimes she thought about her daughter and her son and her husband. Sometimes she cried for them. But mostly she smiled. They would have been proud. Humanity had faced the darkness and won. Not just the war, but something more important. They had won the right to hope again. And in the end, that was all that mattered. The stars waited for humanity. And humanity finally was ready to meet them.